Welcome everyone. My name is Les Raker. I'm the director of the World Heritage Museum here at Mars Hill University. And we are the sponsors of this event. And thank you very much for coming out in the cold. Thank you all the students for being here. And well, this program is one of two that we're having this fall to go along with or go in conjunction with our exhibition at the museum called Our Story, This Place, African American Education in Madison County, the Mars Hill Anderson Rosenwald School. Long title, a lot of stuff. So if you've not seen the exhibition, please come see it. We're open every day, now from 11 until 5. Recently we got permission to be open 2 more hours, so we're open from 11 to 5 every day, but Mondays. And we're also open all through during vacations. We're only closed on principal holidays, Thanksgiving, Christmas, New Year's. That's about it, 4th of July maybe. And so we're open regardless of your vacation. If you happen to be around here with parents or so on, it's a good place to bring them. And parents or guardians or girlfriend or boyfriend or whatever, it's a good place to come. I want to tell you, start by just a little story, and it's something that I took out of the exhibition. Come on in. And it's about a woman named Viola King Barnett. She's been called a crusader of black education. And she's been written about in an article called The Pioneer of Black Education, but also one of the principal African American women early on with regard to important things that they did for African American education and African Americans in general in North Carolina, and especially this part of North Carolina. She lived here in Mars Hill and raised 9 children after her husband's death. I just can't imagine doing it. I really, can you imagine raising 9 children by yourself? But she did. She earned money doing laundry for the students and faculty at Mars Hill College. She became aware, though, of the unfairness of the educational system towards students who were not near a high school where they could attend when her daughters finished primary school education. They went to the Mars Hill Anderson Rosenwald School. And the North Carolina law was that you had to go to school until you were 16, but grade school you're out much earlier than that. And then what do? You repeat the 8th grade over and over and over. And that's what the kids had to do. Madison County had no black school, and her children, because they were African American, could not attend the white school. And so some of them were able to go to Stevens Lee High School and others by living with their relatives, her relatives in Asheville, which was the African American school, one of the principal public African American schools in Asheville. There were also later on some private schools that some of our panel here today went to. But Stevens Lee was a very good school. If you've not been there, I recommend you go there. They have a wonderful kind of Hall of Fame and exhibition about the history of civil rights there. It's no longer a school because we don't need it, but it is a community center. So she got some help from some faculty members here, a woman named Martha Biggers, Cornelia Van, others, people she did washing for. And she got, her daughter got a job as a cook to pay her tuition. She went to Asheville. And so her sister, another daughter, Blanche, went with her brother, went to Stevens Lee, went living down there. But the rest of her children couldn't get there. And in those days, Mars Hill might as well have been on the other side of the planet if you didn't have a car. There was no 26, and I don't know how Merriman Avenue was, but I'm sure it was a trek going down there. And I know some people actually did go down there from here. These people encourage Viola King Barnett, and this is in the 1940s, the height of Jim Crow and segregation, encouraged her to write the superintendent of schools for the state of North Carolina and explain this plight. My children need to go to school until they're 16, but I don't have a school to send them to. I need education. And he wrote back to her. She received a letter from him, and he said, because of your interest in this matter, in the future, all North Carolina children, black and white, will have a chance to go to high school. This one woman made a difference. Her letter, humble woman, to the superintendent of schools, changed the policy for the whole state of North Carolina for white and black children so they can be bused to high school. Because before that, no one got bused. You didn't need to when you lived up here because there was a school close by. So very, very important person. The practical result was that the younger Barnette children and many others after were able to go to high school at the state's expense. And the education tradition continues in her family. Most of her grandchildren have been to college. One is a PhD on the staff of North Carolina Central University in Durham. And her grandson, Kevin, is on the staff here. Kevin Barnette, grandson of Viola King Barnette, graduated from Marceau College in 1985, having been one of the school's star football players. He attained his master's degree from the U.S. Sports Academy in Daphne, Alabama after that, and returned to his alma mater to become assistant football coach, where he works today. Mr. Barnette is an ordained minister, a reverend, and he's a leader and deacon in his Baptist church in Asheville. At Marceau, he helped organize the Fellowship of Christian Athletes at the school, which became one of the largest such organizations in the South. He's also a member of the Marceau Anderson Rosenwald School Friends Group, serving as chair of the Community Relations Committee. So I'm very humbled and proud to introduce Kevin Barnette. He will be
First of all, I'd like to say that it's my honor to be here tonight. Just knowing that I'm connected to this panel. And we cannot justly do them the due credit, what they've gone through, what they've endured by the hour or so minutes that we'll be here tonight. I think in all honesty, that if you could take them home, spend at least an hour or two with them, that your lives would be changed immensely. And I can honestly say that I'm connected to all of them. All of them have done marvelous things in my life. I've seen some of the things that they've endured, and without a shadow of a doubt, they have touched my life in a way that I can't even imagine, I can't comprehend. And I trust tonight that you pull out as much as you possibly can out of them, because they are loaded. They are absolutely loaded. I mean, when you look at them, you see humility, you see grace, you see dignity, you see love, and there's a feistiness to all of them. I mean, they are, all of them are very, very feisty, without a shadow of a doubt. But underneath all of that, there's a tremendous fight and a desire for not only for their families and their legacy that they've set to go forward, but for the black race to go forward as well. So I am very proud to stand before you tonight and do my job of introducing them and then conveying the questions so that we can dig in and find out the nitty-gritty about what they did at the Long Ridge Walswell School and the things that they endured. So before we start, let's go ahead and give them a hand. Okay, first of all, we have Oralene Simmons, who attended the Long Ridge Colored School, later the Marceau Anderson Rosenwald School. She graduated from Stevenson Lee School in Asheville, North Carolina in 1961. Was the first African American admitted to Marceau College, the first admitted to a Baptist college in North Carolina. To put this into context, this was 2 years before Martin Luther King Jr. made his famous I Have a Dream speech. Ms. Simmons is a great-granddaughter of Joseph Anderson, a slave, who was taken in collateral from Marceau College with debt of imprisonment in Asheville jail in 1859. Her grandmother, Effie Anderson Coon, a granddaughter of Joseph Anderson, taught at the Marceau Long Ridge Colored School in 1901, Oralene Simmons became a community leader during her subsequent years of integration and protest. Later, she became the director of the YMI Culture Center in Asheville, North Carolina. She organized the Martin Luther King Jr. Prayer Breakfast in Asheville, the largest in the Southeast, and it continues its leadership of that event to this day. Today, she continues her leadership of cultural diversity activities. She is a member of the Friends Group of Mars Hill Anderson Rosenwald Rehabilitation Project. So we're greatly appreciative to have you here. Let's give her a hand. Next, we have Fatimah Shabazz, who is a broadcaster, a vocal percussionist, an independent transformational facilitator, and a member of a woman's song choir. She is a native of Asheville, North Carolina, attended the Mars Hill Anderson Rosenwald School. In Asheville, she attended Livingston Street School, the Hill Street Elementary School, Stevens Lee High School, Asheville High School, and Blanton's Business School. She also attended the College of in Alameda, California, School of Fashion Design in San Francisco. So let's give her a hand this way. Our next panel guest is Omar Mcclain. He attended the Mars Hill Anderson Rosenwald School, then then Hill Street Elementary School, and Stevens Lee High School in Asheville. He served in the 82nd Airborne Division of the U.S. Army, the U.S. Army Band, and the USO Band. He was honorably discharged after their tour of duty in San Domingo and in Vietnam. He attended Queens College of the University of New York, then worked in finance on Wall Street and everywhere else, he says. Let's give him a hand. Next is Sarah Rowland Weston-Hart. She was born in Mars Hill, North Carolina, to the late Arsemus and Molly Rowland, the youngest of 8 children. She attended the Mars Hill Negro Colored School from 1945 to 1953. She attended Stevenson Lee High School in Asheville, traveled 32 miles each day, graduating in the class of 1957. She married the late James Weston, of which she has 5 children that were born. She now has 23 grandchildren, 37 great-grandchildren, 4 great-great-grandchildren.
My goodness.
A graduate of Mars Hill University in 1975, a BA degree in elementary education. She taught at William Randolph Elementary School in Asheville for 12 years. Married the late Charles Hart in 1984, moved to Virginia, where she taught at a school for 20 years in Alexandria and Woodbridge, Virginia as well. Was also a librarian, administrator, assistant for a new school there. And in 1986, she received her master's degree from George Mason University in leadership development. She retired and moved back home in 2007. Let's give Sarah a hand. Our next panel member is Eugene Jones, who resides in Asheville/Weaverville. He puts down that he is 82 years of age. I believe it's more like 58 years of age. He's been married 58 years to the same female, he says. He resides in Weaverville, North Carolina with the same female. Was in the same school system that we're going to discuss here tonight for 6 years. Born in Tennessee, came to Mars Hill by the way of Asheville, North Carolina. Served in the Navy and the Air Force. Excellent carpenter and a deacon at Mount Olive Baptist Church here in Mars Hill. Let's give Gene a hand. Our next panel member is Dorthy Coon. And Dorthy loves to cook. And I can attest to that. She loves to read. She also does crochet all the time. She was at the Walswell School from 1941 to 1941 to 1949 at the school. After that, she went to Allen High School for 2 years. She got married to her husband, moved to Virginia, where he was in the service. And she retired from Bank of America after 20 years. She came back to Marsville in 1989, and her sister says that she loves to ride motorcycles. Story behind that. The last panel member is Charity Ray. Charity is a local artist and church musician. She retired from Marsville University School of Education in the library department. Her watercolors have been purchased by individuals from many states, and her rendering of the Mount Olive Baptist Church building and the Marsville Anderson Rosenwald School building has been published by friends groups. Ms. Ray loves her art, and she began through allowing to sit in at the school, at the Longwood School, at the age of 5. So when she began her drawings. This was before the days of kindergarten. She continued her artwork at Marsville Anderson Rosenwald School and at Allen High School. For an African American girl in Asheville, she graduated. Today she's a member of the Marsville Art Group, Church Mice, also a member of the History Committee of Marsville Anderson Rosenwald School, Building Rehabilitation Project. She also gives thanks to her parents and teachers at Marsville, the Black School, and Allen High School, and who also encouraged her. So let's one more time give everybody a hand. All right, our plan is really to begin the question. And then at the end, we would like the audience to also fill in and get an opportunity to ask questions as well. Okay? So we'll start out with question number 1, and we're going to ask Oralene to start out with that question, to answer that question. Okay. We'll begin with question number 1, and then we'll just simply flow from there.
Okay.
All right. Where did you live in relation to the location of the school? What was your daily routine like for you getting to and from school?
I did not live in the neighborhood where the school was located. I had to get up very early in the morning and walk for over a mile before I could catch the bus, because that bus would start in Marshall, would go through the town of Marsville. So I had to meet the bus there, and then traveled on, picking up other students until I arrived at the school.
Okay.
Is there another part of that question for me?
In reference to leaving, was it basically the same format?
It was basically the same, and I'm sure the sun was going down by the time I got back. Home in the evening, and then there was night work, and there was school homework.
Will panel members like to elaborate? How far you lived, how you got there?
I lived in Asheville, North Carolina. My opportunity to go to the school was through my mother, who was a school teacher there. It was her first job. And when I was 4 and a half, somewhere like that, instead of leaving me with my grandparents, she decided to bring me with her to school. And that's how I got started. But our routine was early morning rising, breakfast, and then she would drive to an area in Asheville called Clayman Avenue, and she would pick up another school teacher, Mrs. Frances Owens. And Mrs. Owens' family owned a little store underneath their house, and Miss Owens would bring me a little carton of chocolate milk every single morning. She would bring me a little carton of chocolate milk every morning, and I would drink that on the way from Asheville, driving to Marsville to get my school day started.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I was on that same bus that Oralene was talking about, but I was coming from a little further. At the age of about 4, I was coming from Marshall, on that same little small school bus, and we'd make the rounds. But at that age, by the time I got to school, I was almost asleep because you'd have to get up so early to make the other stops to get the other people along the way. And then, you know, just like she said, you'd have to make that trip back, you know. And I always thought, you know, the most wonderful thing was that when I was going there, one of the students was a driver, one of my classmates, Philip Briscoe. And he would have to get up even earlier than all of us because he would have to drive to Marshall and then drive back and then drive back and then drive back. So, you know, I appreciated what he did more than anybody, you know.
Well, I guess I lived the closest because I could almost see the school from where I lived, and I always had a good hot breakfast because my father was a tobacco farmer, and my mom always got up, cooked biscuits and everything, but I was right there.
So you're saying you never missed school, right?
I don't think so. I missed a few days.
I guess I'm different from all, because when the time that I go beyond, I guess, anyone on this panel. And during that time, if my memory serves me right, at about the age of 6, we were fortunate enough to have to spend 2 years on a farm. 2 years that I do not want to recall. It was not that pleasant. You can imagine a child at the age of 6 or 7 when he should have been in school out on the farm. And those corn rows get pretty long, and tobacco rows or whatever you into. I was unfortunate. We had sharecrop, and a lot of you know what sharecropping is. Each person has to help the other person that's out there on that farm. And for a person 6, 7, or 8 years old, that's a no-no. So I spent. They had a little bus, a little dingy bus. It's actually a car, and I think Oscar Young was the driver of that particular setup. Some way I missed it, and since I missed the first day, I missed 2 years. So by the time that I got back to school, I was about 8 years old and starting in the first grade. So I remember the first grade as there was nobody else in the first grade other than myself. So the teacher, I don't remember, I guess that was Mrs. Wilson during that time. We had 2 classes. I was in the first grade. So since you were the only one in the first grade, we don't need you in the first grade. You can go to the second grade. So I didn't spend too long in that first grade, but I did go to the second grade and progressed through that. I think I was allowed to stay. We got off of that farm by all means after only a couple of years. And thank the good Lord, I didn't want to be on another farm. There's nothing wrong with farming, but as a child, I didn't want any part of the farming. But after that, we came back down to in the area where the school is located now. And it wasn't that far for me to go to school, just across the hill, because I was by the way, my parents, I only remember my mother. And we didn't have it that great. But we did survive, and we had plenty to eat. But during that time, I remember Mrs. Wilson when she came out, and we had this little school as it stands out there, the shell that stands out there. There were 2 rooms, and I believe it was from the first grade through the 4th, and then from the 5th grade throughout the rest of the year, as far as I recall. But anyway, I went through that. I did every grade except the 8th. At the 8th grade, I don't know what happened, but I skipped it. Next thing I remember, I'm over in Stevens Lee. That was 49, somewhere along that time. That's been my life has been ups, downs, rounds, or whatever you want to have it, but it hasn't been all that great, but it molded me to where I am today, and I think that it did happen. That's fate. Fate will sometimes give you things that will strengthen you farther up in life. You can look back on that and say thank you. I thank my relatives for, as I said, I never knew Dad. I only knew him when I went in the Navy because I had to have a birth certificate. But I thank my aunts, my uncles, and all of the people who stood up to the plate and brought me to where I should be at that particular time. I went in the Navy, and then spent about 3.5 years in the Navy. I came out of the Navy, stayed a while, and then I went in the Air Force. But all during that time, I went back to Stevens Lee, that's right. I went back to Stevens Lee and spent some time over there. I took trade for 18 months. And that's a good background for the things that I can do now. So my life has just been hits, misses, but I made it. Thank the good Lord. Without him, I would not have been to where I am now. That's only a minute particle of it all. But if I gave you the whole story, you'd be here 12 o'clock.
All right. Would you other two like to elaborate on that question? How you got to the school?
Well, now we lived right down from where Ingalls is now. We lived there when I first started school. And if our father didn't take us to school, we would come uptown and catch the man that was bringing the children from Marshall. And I'm like, Gene, I'm one of the older ones. And we would do that. And like we said, our mother and father were both in the home. And she would get up and cook breakfast and all of that. And most of the time, we would come uptown with our father. And our mother, she worked also. And I was 6, I guess, when I started. I don't know where then they had, if your birthday was in January, you was back or so, whatever. My birthday was in January. So I think I was 6 years old when I started. And in the 40s was when our mother and father bought land. And as a matter of fact, they brought it from Sir Ann's father, the land where we have now. And they built a house there, which is closer to the school now. And then we could just walk to school. You know, we would walk to school.
In mud.
As Charity says, in the mud, because it definitely wasn't paved out that way then. And it was clay mud.
Yes.
It was clay. But as far as the school, I enjoyed school and all of that. And when I was there from 41 to 49, and then I went to Allen High School. And it definitely, when I went to Allen, it was dark when I left and dark when I got back. Because we had to leave earlier than the children that went to Stevens Lee, because our class took up earlier. And so I can remember my mother standing on the porch, like now this time, well, no, it's not now, before the time changed when it was dark. She would stand on the porch and talk to me till I got up to where the Kingdom Hall is now. And then we would meet my cousins and all of them that went to Allen up there. Then we'd walk on up to the end of the road, and that's where we'd catch the bus. It was a bus that ran back and forth from Mars Hill to Asheville. And I think it ran every hour. Did it run every on hour?
A local bus. Or
Yeah, local bus.
Yeah, something like that.
Something
yeah.
like that. And, and that's it.
I can't remember the down times for remembering the up times because I can remember all the joys that I had because I was always a joyful person and I enjoyed meeting joy people. And when I think of, you know, coming from down and going up, I remember the fun things. Like when we walked out to the road to catch the bus to ride to Asheville, what greeted us but some mean goose. They chased us all the way to the bus stop. And that was fun when I remember it now, but it wasn't fun then. And I remember when I went to school, my mother couldn't find a babysitter, so she asked the teacher if I could come and just sit there and when I was 5 years old. And so I sat there and getting bored, she'd give me a piece of paper and a pencil and I start scribbling, and I looked and she says, "Oh, is that so-and-so, so-and-so?" I said, yes. And she always titled my sketching, which I didn't have a title to. And so anyway, I got interested in that and she asked me if I would paint the different scenes around the bulletin board, the blackboard, like rabbits for Easter and Christmas trees for Christmas and things like that. And it just got me interested, and ever since then, I have been painting. And I paint still life and those things that that are around me that I see that's beautiful, that's going to fade away soon, and I want to keep them in my mind, so I put it on paper. And it's good and it's relaxing for me. And then when I get uptight, I just take out my paints and my brushes and I start painting. Then I forget about the bad times. And then when I went to Allen, I went there, I forget now, I had a moment when I thought that I wasn't getting anywhere, just going to school. And then when I came out of school, someone wanted me to work for them in the house, do domestic work. And I thought, well, this is boring. Why do I need to go to school? So I stopped going to Allen for, I guess a couple of weeks. And my mother had to pay, and father had to pay a tuition for us to go to the private school. So anyway, Mom said, you'd better make up your mind because I'm not going to waste any more money sending you to Allen and you're going to drop out. So when I saw everyone else catching the bus, I got lonesome and I wanted to catch the bus too and go to school. So that's what I did. I went to school and I graduated Allen in '55. And then when I came out, I was still doing work. And then they had in the newspaper a draw me thing. I don't know if you all remember that or not. Mm-hmm. Well, I did that, and they have a cardinal bird in there. So I did it in crayon, and then when I took the eraser to the crayon, it was like it was waxed. And I sent that in. The first thing I knew, somebody was knocking on the door saying, is this where Cherry Ray lives? My mother said, yes. He said, well, I want to talk to her about entering our school. So anyway, those that Mom worked for, when she asked them what should she do, they told her that there was, that's not a good thing to be an artist and expect to make a living out of it. And I understand that today. And anyway, she said no, she wasn't going to spend that money. Well, that was fine with me, but I kept right on doing it. And then I went to New York on a vacation, and my cousin that I visited in New York said, "Why don't you stay here and get your job?" And I said, okay. So I did that, and I was there 10 years during the 60s, and that's when they were having a difficult time down south during the 60s. And I stayed there and all during the 60s, and I found a job in retail and worked in a department store. And then I was leaving on vacation, and my boss said, I told him I felt like I had to go home. And I said, so I'm going to take my vacation now. So he said, well, you go home, and when you come back, you will always find a job here in this store. So I did that. I came home, and then wasn't long after that, discovered my father had cancer, terminal cancer, and he passed away not long after that. And then my mother says, Charity, let's just move. I said, where are we going? She said, well, let's move to Asheville. I said, no. I said, we're going to think this out first. And I saw that she was thinking irrationally, so I stayed home with her to look after her and never did go back to New York. And anyway, then she passed away. So I was glad that I stayed home and looked after her. And then everything worked out when I came to Mars Hill College, and they were just like family to me, and they were just simply wonderful. And then somebody says they had, what was that, Upward Bound? Was that what the program was called then? And wanted me to join that. I did, and got a job here and just stayed on for 39 years. And I still enjoy coming back, but a lot of the new faculty I don't know, and I'm sorry that I don't know you, but I'd like to get to know you. And I just enjoy coming back every once in a while to campus.
All right, I'm going to ask you guys some bang questions about the Long Ridge School. So they're going to be quite in succession, okay? Like the first would be, did you guys have textbooks, water, lunches, restrooms?
We had textbooks, but they were used, and we had outdoor restrooms, outdoor water.
And no lunch, no lunches.
No lunches.
You either
No
brought
lunches.
your lunch, or either if you lived close enough, you went home and had lunch.
There was no water there.
No.
No, you had to go to a spring. Spring way
When
down
we
under the
went-
hill when we went. You were living in luxury.
She sure was.
Yeah.
No, we didn't have any water out there when we went. And the bathrooms were outside in the privilege.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We didn't have that. You know, well, we had that, but we didn't have any water. It had to be from the spring. That's where the 3 children that died from the disease from the water. See,
Yes.
If y'all remember earlier, I said all you guys were feisty. Remember that, right?
Yes.
So what kind of discipline did the teachers give you?
Well,
She had a paddle. They
Yes.
had a paddle.
Yeah, like a
They
bowling.
had paddles like a bolo bat, and I'm trying
Yeah.
to think what was the occasions in which she used it. Maybe if you missed so many spelling words or didn't study your reading. I don't ever remember any reason for getting a spanking unless it was something that pertained to academics, and because we were all such good kids, right? We didn't get in trouble. Am I right?
Well, I'll tell you something that I kind of remember was the school and your parents were like acting simultaneously together. In other words, if you got discipline in school, when you got home, look to get it again double, you know, because whatever when they dropped you off at school, the teacher had full rights. Whatever was there, and they believed whatever she said. So, and it usually was right.
Well, I can remember, I was a good kid, but I can remember they used to spank us. We had to learn the 23rd Psalm. We had to learn the 12th chapter of Romans. I can say it now. I beseech you therefore, brother, by the mercy of God. That held on to me because I got whippings until I learned it. And then there was, I don't know what his name, James Stokely or someone was talking that she was asking people, any of the boys ever touched you or kissed you? And James Stokely said he kissed me and she whipped me because I didn't tell it. I remember that. So they would just whip you. You'd have to lean over the desk and she'd take the bowl of, this was Miss Owens. I can't remember, my first through fourth grade teacher was Miss Bess. And my 5th through the 8th grade teacher was Miss Grace Owens. And she was sort of heavy, but you had to lean over the desk for her spankings. We did.
All right, we're getting close to Thanksgiving, right? What did y'all do on special occasions for Christmas? Did you go on field trips or anything like that? Or?
I remember field trips, but we also had a chance to be in nature and decorating our schoolroom from nature, like leaves or the pine cones and things like that. We would go out and collect those, and we would create our own decorations for the school. That was one thing. But I do also remember field trips, like down Old Fort Mountain, going down Old Fort. I'm trying to remember some other places.
Yeah, we're gone. I remember one time we took the bus to, I think it was Hot Springs or Marshall One, and then we got on the train and we rode to Old Fort for a picnic, and then came back, and that was very exciting for us to ride a train. You know, some of us hadn't even been on a bus, but to get to ride the train, that was a wonderful field trip for us.
My field trips, I remember we went to the Smokies, and I have pictures to show that. And we were, that was really for us, you know, to going to the Great Smoky Mountains. Wasn't Cherokee then, I don't think, but it was Great Smoky Mountains. And we would always, like Fatimah said, decorate, and then at the end of the year, we would have a play. Every year we had a play. Sometimes we would dress up, you know, our evening, and then sometimes whatever the theme was. But we always had a play at the end of the year.
Now, I also remember one of the things that I kind of enjoyed was part of the curriculum was about the nature of the land and stuff. Cause they would always have us doing projects where we'd have to collect various types of leaves and know which one was which and that kind of stuff, and we'd have to glue them on the crepe paper and that kind of stuff. So we were very in touch. Part of the school was very in touch with the environment and the nature and how it provided for us all the time.
Now, when I went, we didn't go on field trips we went on, we had to walk. We had to walk and collect the leaves.
Yeah, the leaves.
And the flowers and all of that, and we walked
3 miles.
3 or 4 or 5 miles. Didn't we, Gene?
Yeah, only transportation I remember is one time we went to the fair. All this, I was there before most of you were there, and we didn't do a whole lot of that. They learned to do different things as the classes progressed.
Okay.
But that time we wasn't doing that many things. That I say that one time we went to the fair, and I can remember, and I never will forget that Mrs. Wilson, I love her today. God rest her soul. We were going to the fair, and everybody was going except myself. She wanted to know, why are you not going to the fair? I said, I don't have any money. So she provided my way to the fair. And there's another little thing that went on. Someone had to build fires each morning, and that paid so much. So I got that job of building fire. I think we had 2 stoves because there was 2 different rooms. So I got the job of I had to go early and build a fire each morning. And I got, for that, probably got 50 cents or whatever it was, whatever the going rate was during that time. But it was enjoyable. But I don't remember the bowler bat, but I do remember. I remember the switches, and she had a ruler. Very teacher had a ruler so long, and they would get your hand and twist it back, and they would wear that hand out. And that wasn't only for academics. That was for other things, because I guess I was mischievous. I was doing other stuff, and I deserved everything I got. That part I remember. But we did have those plays. I remember the plays. We had those also. And I remember being on stage. But overall, it was okay.
Now, was the community involved in your school life?
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
In what ways were they involved?
Those families, the children that went to the school, their families were right there.
Right.
So, yeah.
So they came to the school and was in the school?
Oh, yeah. I remember, and I have pictures to show, every time there was a play going on, the whole room would be full. People be standing around the edge. So they came out and they supported the children and their plays and whatever activities they were doing.
And they would make, like, if we had I can remember 2 long dresses being made by, my mother could sew a little bit, but, they would get together and we, make our costumes. Our parents would.
Because our mother, she had 3 daughters. So she always made our costume. And then plus we had a cousin that came and stayed with us too and went to school. So she would make all of our, whatever costumes we had to have, she would make them. And plus talking about the community getting involved in the school, well, even the Mars Hill community, they would come to our plays and stuff like that. You remember that, Gene?
Yeah.
When we'd have our plays and they would come, like the people our parents worked for or they knew, they would come to all our plays or anything we were having. If we were having something more like we always had a choir. And if we'd had something like a concert, they would be there and all. So they took interest in the school also.
Well, that kind of tied into my next question was, what was the relationship between the black community and the white community at that time?
Well, it was good, I think, with the ones that you knew, they didn't treat us any different, They was always kind to us and everything. And one thing, my father, he worked for most all of them, doing odd jobs and stuff like that. And they would see that he had this for his children, for the girls or whatever, And so it was kind of like even with the Morris Hill community, it all was just like a family, you know.
And sometimes there was some that would try you to see how far you would go. And then when you stick to your guns, they back off. They become your friend. And it was like that around Morris Hill. There were some, you know, that thought, you know, we'll see how strong they are. You know, like when they walk down the sidewalk, you're supposed to step off the sidewalk. And that didn't work well.
I guess,
Go ahead.
I guess I remember race was never
That's just what I
talked
was gonna
about
say. Yeah.
in our house. I don't know where everybody thought we were white or African American, but I did play with the white kids. I go right around the curve from the church, and I think their last name was I can't remember. We used to play together, and I'd go home, but it did not dawn on me there's something wrong here, because you know I didn't see them as white. They didn't see me as black. We just played together. We saw each other as children. So.
Well, the same thing here. I from growing up in Marshall, I mean, your next door neighbor wouldn't be another black family most of the time. It would be 2 or 3 white families, and then maybe, well, there wasn't that many black families in Marshall, but it didn't hinder anything that was going on. I mean, like I say, I was just like she said, I really wasn't that aware of the magnitude of the racial situation as a kid. I didn't become aware of it until later on, you know. Then, you know, I'm saying, well, where was I at, you know? But I just didn't see it as a kid.
I know as a child, it is that you don't really realize there is a difference unless you're going through something different or to something different. We accepted who we were, and it was an unspoken thing of stay in your place, the thing of lowering your eyes when you passed a white person on the street. The community I lived in, there were more white people that lived there than black people. Our house was the last house in the hollow, and we had to pass by these houses where white people lived, and they were cordial. They would come out and would speak to us, and maybe we'd have a conversation about the weather or something like that. Sometimes we played with the children that lived in the neighborhood. I was allowed to go to work with my grandmother when she did domestic work in the home of a white person, and I always played with the children during the time that my grandmother was working. But I knew that they were going to one school that was across the street that had the shiny playground equipment, a restroom that was a commode that flushed, and that I was going way to the other end of town with a school that was opposite. And I really never saw the change in the relationship with these other families during the time that I lived there. And I know my grandmother always told me I was supposed to say sir and ma'am, even though I would argue with her that it's okay to say yes and no without using the ma'am and the sir, because I thought that was being a respectful thing. Yes, I was feisty. Yes. And that proved it. I did see a change in our neighbors when I became a student here at the college. I had to walk by these same houses again on my way from here. And it was like the people in those houses changed, or they thought that I had changed because here I was a black person and I'm going to a white school, and it is, how do I speak to her now? What do we say? And I was shocked and I was surprised because I was accustomed to walking up this road and speaking to all the people, but it's like they came out and they stared at me, and I would speak and they wouldn't speak back. And it was that probably it took them 2 or 3 months before they were actually able to say a warm good morning or good evening to me again. And I think at that time I realized, you know, there is this, there is really this difference. And I think they saw it coming too, because here it is, something new in Mars Hill, and she's done something different. Has she changed? Is she going to continue speaking to us? But that was one thing that I strongly remember and I feel.
That kind of ties into this question. How do you think integration affected the black community in Madison County?
We were all gone by that time.
I was gone, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, we were gone.
I was gone.
Yeah.
Yeah, from school.
What would you sense? How do you think that integration affected the black community? What would you think?
Well,
when
I
go ahead.
Talked with Philip
affected the black
Briscoe,
community.
who was still here at the time. I think
I
he was
wasn't
5. And he mentioned the effect of the diversity as far as he was concerned. It wasn't a smooth selling situation. I mean, because all those years, all those many multitude of years, it had all been predominantly African Americans attending the school, you know, within the community. Then all of a sudden, here we are starting to integrate with people. I didn't have any problem with the school here. I had problems with people in Asheville, so it was still happening there. But yeah, he was a part of that transition from an all-black school to the integrated school.
Yeah, I was gone before integration started too. I had already went to the service. However, feedback that I received from a lot of people who when Stevens Lee closed and they had to go to Asheville High was they actually thought that the teachers that were teaching them then, when after integration, was a step back from what we had at Stevens Lee. Case in point, every teacher we had in Stevens Lee had masters, every single one. Now, I don't know because I didn't go to when the integration was there, but I heard when the integration started, they accepted less, you know, to go there. And a lot of the black teachers that were at Stevens Lee wouldn't take less, you know, to go there. So all not all of them, the majority of the teachers who were teaching with Stevens Lee had the masters and stuff just dissipated because they wasn't going to take a step backward.
Yeah, let's pay everything.
Well, I can know what my niece tells me. I have nieces and I have nephews that they went to Mars Hill, Rosenwald School for I think they went 2 years, and then that's when they integrated, and I think they had a hard time, really, even after Bryant and he was going to, you know, Madison High School. I think they really had it was a hard time. And I know I had children by then, and they went to North Buncombe in Weaverville, and the same thing really happened. As a matter of fact, I pulled my 2 youngest ones out of North Buncombe, and because I was teaching in Asheville then, because of some things that was going on. So I pulled my 2 youngest ones out, and they graduated from Asheville High, but the other 3 graduated from North Buncombe. And but there was, you know, a little bit, but we survived.
I'm going to ask one more question, and then we're going to take some questions from the audience. Your fondest memory of Long Ridge School? Your fondest memory?
Recess.
Yeah,
He's right.
that was good.
Yeah, I think that was mine too, because I remember us playing what we call ring games.
Yes.
And there were times when the teachers would come out and play with us, and we would have this one huge circle and play the farmer in the dale. And where they would accept the wife and the child. And I was so tiny. I was one of the youngest children there, and I was tiny. And it was like by the time I was selected, it was like I was the cheese or the rat. the very last one, you know, I didn't ever get to be the wife that danced with the husband in the center. But it was fun, and I enjoyed that. And yes, that is one of my fun memories is playing ring games, and how I wish that children today could play ring games instead of and not go outside.
Sure. Because and that did mean a lot, because just like now, if you tell a kid to go to their room, they're happy because everything they want is in there. I mean, you know, there was no solitary going on, and the games, like you said, by being maybe it's because we were a small number of people, but everybody, you know, when lunch happened, everybody would be collectively playing, just like she said, whatever it was, everybody would collectively go together, you know, just like you know, family.
I guess I liked the when we used to have plays, because I like to act. And I really, you know, I really liked that when we had to learn, you know, we had to learn our lines, and then, so I think that, and then my first through fourth grade teachers, I said Miss Bess, I was her favorite, but you know, she just, you know, she took up like more time, and like if it was snowing or something, they lived in Asheville, I can remember many nights she stayed with us, you know, because they couldn't go back to Asheville. So I think that, you know, I can remember the plays that we had, and like going to the Smokies and playing games too, all that.
Used to play baseball and all of that. Used
that
to
I
play
know that
baseball.
When I left school out here, there was a thought process that children that went to the county schools were undereducated.
Yeah.
And when you went into the city school system, they would put you back.
Right.
Yeah. So for some reason, but most of the kids that came out of the school, our school out here, Mars Hill, all of them predominantly went to Stevens Lee. All of them predominantly created the African American communities in Asheville. But I thought that was that disparity of the school systems, how they look down really on county schools, especially black kids that went to county schools.
That's true.
My fondest memory that I have is our dance group that we had. We visited the different schools in Madison County, and we had a little Turkish dance. And we had crepe paper hats and crepe paper dresses. Oh, we were something, in patent leather shoes. And I will not wear patent leather shoes today. Anyway, and we visited the schools down in Marshall, and they enjoyed our little group, and we sang songs too. We had a singing group, a choir, that we sang, and that was a fond memories for me. And I still remember that dance today. It was on your toes, not flat-footed, on your toes. And we just enjoyed that. And each one of us had a partner. And I think the boys wore black pants and white shirts. And I still remember that.
All right. When asked if you have questions, if you would stand.
Was there some student from Hot Springs? Or that was only from Marshall?
No, Hot Springs too.
Hot
Yeah.
Springs as well.
So that was even a longer way.
And if I remember right, and Omar, correct me if I'm wrong, the students from Hot Springs would catch the train.
Yes.
And then go to Marshall, catch the bus, and then on to Mars Hill, and then round the circle, and then to the school.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
So I imagine it wasn't much time for them to get sleep at all. Because they had to catch the railroad train.
So in
No, they had train in Mars Hill. I mean, Marshall.
How did that happen then? There was quite a bit of black people in Hot Springs, and then after a certain time,
Well,
it disappeared.
well, what I have read about Hot Springs, at one time, there were more African Americans there in that town than any other town in Madison County, and it was because of the workers that were there for the hot springs and the big hotel, et cetera, and the meal. But after the fire, the grind up of the springs, the sawmills closing, they moved away seeking work. And then there were only a few African American families that lived there during the time that we were in school. And probably at that time, Hot Springs had probably one of the lowest number. Yeah, because it was more in Marshall, and then even more in Mars Hill.
Almost over there.
And to this day, they still have the least amount.
Still have what?
They still have right now, in the population, in Hot Springs, there's the least amount of
Yes.
black people.
Yes.
So I've always been very curious,
Is there any
Yes.
blacks that live in Hot Springs now?
Yes.
Is there any blacks that live in Hot Springs?
I don't know.
I wonder if Charity Ray would talk a little bit about the students who died, and were they classmates of yours, and tell me about the water situation.
She don't know if you would talk about the students that died, and was they classmates of
You
you?
remember? Me either.
They died from typhoid.
Oh, the ones that died from typhoid were my relatives. They were cousins of mine. It was my mother's uncle's children.
And
Was it all at one time they died, or over the process of a few months, and how did they decide that it was the water? How did they figure that out?
she said, how did they die over a few months of each other? And how did they determine it was typhoid or whatever from the water?
The water was tested because they found out that there was a CC camp right up here, and the water ran down there, and they emptied all their waste in there in the stream. And the county had it tested.
And then did the town put a water line? Tell me about what the town did then, or maybe Les could elaborate on that, and how you got water to the school.
How we got water
How
to
you got
the...
water to the school? Someone then requested of the county that they put a water line to the school?
The running water,
Yeah.
that was after I,
You,
it
Well-
wasn't there when I was there.
do you remember the story, Charity and Dorothy, about how the water lines were only run down so far
Right.
to that end, and then it was up to everybody else to dig their own?
The men folks had to, when they finally decided to run water out that way, it only came as far as the church. But the men of the community had to dig the trenches for the pipes. And it was, I don't know what year it was put out at the school, but all that was after I had left. That I had left and married and gone to Virginia.
Plus where we live, there was a well out from our house, and it was pure water, so we got our water from that well.
That well was right out there where the Kingdom Hall is. They cemented over it.
And I think it was with the death of the children that they were able to get the water lines extended further down. I think it stopped at a certain point because that was the last house where people lived, and the pipes didn't go on down, and and they continued to ask for it in the testing of the water, and after the death of the children. Then the water lines were completed for running water there, and they no longer had to use a spring. Am I right? Am I right, Dorothy?
But it didn't, it came as far as the church. Richard, you got that. Didn't it come as far as the church? And then it was later, it didn't go to the school right then.
Right. It was after the children died, is that right?
It was quite a bit later.
Well,
Yeah,
it was way, it was,
Until the 1950s.
It must
Yeah.
have been because I helped put that water line in.
You did?
Yes, and it didn't go to the school then. It went to the school after I left.
yeah.
I wasn't around at that time, but I did. I remember helping dig that water line. It went down. Each person, if you wanted water, you had to get in that ditch and dig it. And that's what happened. So, yeah.
I was curious what people were living by when you were there. You mentioned farm work and there's sharecropping and there's domestic work. What sustained was the main kinds of work that were sustaining that community when you all were in school?
That was it.
Yeah,
Either domestic work or sharecropping.
Predominantly people of the Long Ridge area work domestic work, especially the females, because that's about all the society was accepting at that time from females. That's just the way it was. Now the men, farmers, that too. But the men had a little bit more opportunities at that time, because they would do manual labor that maybe the females would or couldn't do. So the men were afforded a little better opportunities. But the women, basically, if you was a female during that time, and your work would be domestic.
My father
Also,
moved from,
Go ahead. I was gonna say, part of growing up in Madison County, children also work the land. I mean, they may miss school a day or two or whatever to harvest whatever needed to be harvested. So they did that as well as, and then you got right back in school.
And
well, I didn't have to do that. I tell them no. But my family moved over in January of 1940, and my father was a farmer in Yancey County. So he sold his property in Yancey County, and I didn't know, but he bought all this land in Mars Hill.
Right.
Everybody, he bought all this huge land in Mars Hill, and he had one of the largest tobacco. That's what he was. He was a tobacco farmer. I can remember that was his. He didn't have any sharecroppers. He may have had in Yancey County, but when he got over here, he had his own, because he raised his own tobacco and gardens and.
Now, my father, he worked, he didn't do that much sharecropping. He was a janitor for the clinic for the doctors of Morris Hill, him and my mother both. Plus my mother, she was a domestic worker also. But he mostly worked for, they did the clinic, cleaned it, janitorial work for that. And then mostly the men, not all the men that had stores, like Grace Gibbs store, and there was a grocery store, and I can't remember the name of it.
Wells.
He would work for Wells,
Harry Wells.
Harry Wells grocery store. Well, he would go into Asheville every day and pick up, or either every other day, and pick up the produce for him
Train depot.
at the train depot. He would go and pick up the produce for that store. And then plus he worked for Grace Gibbs then when they had their store. And also he did, I only remember him one time doing, sharecropping. And I think it was for one of the Andersons ladies, where the big White House is down here. I think that's what it is. And I remember we didn't work, only time we worked in that time, I think he only did it for 1 year, was drop the tobacco plant. We did that. Other than that, the girls didn't do anything other than, like on the farm or anything like that. And then he had his garden and all of that.
And we have time for one more question.
How many children were in the school at the time you were there?
Good question.
So there were 8 grades, and in each one of the grades there was about
20, 30 kids.
See, the rooms were not that large, and we had a divider. So when I went, I think maybe there were maybe 15 or 20 in maybe the 1st through the 4th, maybe more than that, and the 5th through the 8th.
Did the teacher teach the subjects separately, or did
No.
she integrate them together?
She integrated them together. I can remember, so I guess that's the reason why we all went.
They must have changed. When we were there, they were more individualized.
Yeah, they were.
Yeah.
You had individual going
Right.
by each,
See, there was a great transition.
Yeah, because we had different books, for each grade level. It was like your reading, writing, arithmetic, for each, and your timetables. For each grade. And while she was working with one grade, which could have been about 5 students, the other ones were assigned quiet work at their desk, or study your reading or something, or do your art. But she would move around to each one.
Did you use any other students to do teaching?
Not that I can remember.
I don't remember that. But like she just said, I often marvel at that, because it seems like she was always in control of nobody would be sitting there doing nothing. Like the first, she'd have these little group of people doing this, and then she'd bounce right over to the next one, and then if somebody over here was up, she'd have to bounce back over here. But she would was on a roller coaster around that room, and all the kids in there, because like you said, you had 4 grades at the same time, simultaneously being taught at the same time. And it was, they could juggle that though.
But everyone got, every student got attention. Every student was left, not paid attention to. Are you doing okay? What do you need? I mean, they paid attention to the students.
And when we left that school, we were prepared to go into the schools in Asheville and was on the same level or a higher level than everyone else there. We could compete, and we were in there. Yes.
Yeah,
we did.
Exactly.
We did.
Yeah.
We did.
Great teachers were sometimes great parents too.
Now when we went, like when Jones and I went, there was quite a few children.
Right.
Because we had a whole lot then that was around our age and everything. There was quite a few of us, because there was, about 6 or 8 or 10 of us that went to Allen.
Oh, yes.
See.
And I want to go back to your question as to how they made a living, I had a great uncle who made hook rugs for a living. And he lived down where the quick shop is, right there in that corner. So he made hook rugs. Because we as children used to walk down there and separate the colors for him. We put this color went together and that color went together. And I remember that.
I remember those rugs standing on the highway, a lot of them.
He said something about the rugs for sale. There was a lot of them.
The rugs for sale.
I said, I remember how the rugs were for sale.
Oh, yeah, he remembers that.
And everybody managed to barter, you know. If my mother needed some sugar or something, she would catch a hen or something, you know, or eggs, you know, in exchange.
All right. In closing tonight, I think to put a spin on tonight, if you're a student, I think the first thing you ought to think is that, number one, you have no excuses. Obviously, by just hearing some of the things that they've said, should just even motivate you even more with the gifts that you have and the opportunities that you have. If you're my generation and above, we just simply celebrate you. We thank you for all that you've endured and all the things that you've gone through to be the success that you've been. And with that, as you leave tonight, make sure that you take the time just to introduce yourself, maybe just a couple of seconds, because they're really unique. I really respect them, and I appreciate your stance and who you are and the legacy that you carry.
Thank you, Kevin.
All right.
Great host.
We're formally dismissed at this time.
You're free.
I stayed the whole time.